you're a type 1 diabetic, so it's not like this just started a couple of years ago. You had a poor diet, you're overweight. This is something you've lived with since you were young. And in fact, we talked about when you got diagnosed, what your mom thought maybe was the problem.
Rodeo time.
Welcome to the Luke Branquinho Show. My next guest has been a guest on before, and we talked about a lot of interesting things, especially for me being a diabetic and an athlete and somebody that wants to obviously live longer and a healthier life after the sport of rodeo. I have my good friend, Dr. Lonnie Empey, joining us today again. Lonnie.
Great. Thanks, Luke, for having me on.
Well, I appreciate you coming on again. And since the last show that we did, I have got a chance to tour the lab, tour the clinic. I've got to get stem cells put into me, and the difference that I felt it was huge. And that's another reason why I wanted to have you on, because from the last time we talked on the show to now, you guys have came a long ways.
Yeah, we've it's been a long kind of grueling process to get where we are. We've got our lab FDA registered. It's also got our clean rooms are certified. So there's a lot of things that had to be done from a technical standpoint to make sure that we could start recovering the tissue. So what we do in general is, like we've talked about before, we're kind of a tissue bank recovery.
Right.
We recover the umbilical cord tissue, and then we isolate the stuff we're looking at for therapeutics, going forward. So,
well, and going into the lab and seeing what you guys did, just the investment to put in to make it one of the, and I don't know much about it, but that's world class. I mean, state of the art equipment you guys have in there to make the very best product available.
Right, and I think the thing that got me into this, down the road, I mean, what kind of pushed me into what we're doing here is I didn't know what I was getting when I was getting stuff from other people. I mean, what product am I getting? This, I know what I'm getting. I know how we did it. I know how it was recovered. I know what techniques were used. And so I get a much better sense of recognizing the product we have there's not going to be variability with our product because I know what it is. So I think one of the most important pieces of what we're doing here is to make sure that the stuff we're going to utilize for therapeutics in the future will be stuff that I have faith in, knowing that the product that we're recovering is the real product. It's something that I know is there. I mean, you go across the border, I don't know what you're getting. I can't tell you what you're getting. And it's really hard to tell unless you have these diagnostic parameters that you can look at the tissue and stuff that you're looking at and say, okay, this is what's in it. It's really hard to do that when you don't have that data. So
yeah, and for you folks out there watching and listening, it's mesenchymal stem cells from the umbilical cord. And it's what'd you call it? Zero negative. What was it? The word you used?
It's a carbon. It's a negative. Yeah, it's a negative carbon footprint. We're recovering stuff that was supposed to be thrown out. So it's tissue that's clean. It's tissue that's recovered with a birthing tissue bank company that we use. But it's definitely. We're taking that stuff that could have been thrown out and burned up in the environment, and we're recovering the tissue that we need out of it. So
tested, it's clean, it's pure. You guys go through every step to make sure, like I said, the very best stem cells out on the market. And for me, I'd been down to Mexico and Tijuana and had stem cells. I believe it was blue shark mesenchymal stem cells, which I know it's similar as far as it's a stem cell that hasn't turned into anything yet, but it's also a shark stem cell. It's not actual human stem cells. And I honestly feel like, and I don't think I even told you this because I hurt everywhere before I got the IV, but my feet, being a diabetic, number one, I'd always kind of feel like, man, it's a little sore, a little sting or a little tingle or something. My big toe for 2 years, this is no shit, was literally kind of numb on the tip. And I broke it steer wrestling, and it just never would feel right. After I got the IV, it's just something kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
But now I did something the other day. I'm like, oh, wow, I got feeling in that toe again. My feet don't hurt. I don't get that, I guess, neuropathy type feel that diabetics, can get. And I was telling my wife about that, and she's like, well, why do you think that? I said, there's only one thing I did different in the last 2 years to this point, and that was getting the stem cells. So as a patient, I think it was huge for what it just did to my feet.
Right. And I think that's the thing that's surprising for what the therapeutics that we're seeing is that there's lots of data out there that show promise and where things can be utilized. And I think when you have, especially if you're a diabetic, you're a type 1 diabetic. So it's not like this just started a couple of years ago. You know, you had a poor diet, you're overweight. This is something you've lived with since you were young. And in fact, we talked about when you got diagnosed, what your mom thought maybe was the problem. I kind of laughed, but I think about going back to that, what the outcomes could have been when you started. I mean, your age now, and the fact that you don't have severe neuropathy, you don't have blindness, you don't have all the typical findings you would see. And I will tell you, there's 2 reasons that is. I think 1, you're very diligent about making sure your sugar's controlled, and 2, you're an athlete who is an athlete. I mean, in the sense that you had to perform in a professional sport that required a lot of effort. It's not like it required dedication and the effort that you had to put into it wasn't like, well, I can just kind of skate by. There's no way you can make the national finals by just skating by.
Right.
So I think because of that, you're so much farther ahead of the curve as a type 1 diabetic. But I also think that there's anything we can do to help, alleviate or eliminate some of the risks that might come forward. There really is every indication that we should try to do those things as long as there's nothing that's out there that's going to hurt you. So the idea here is we don't want to hurt you, but if it can help, that would be great.
Howdy, everybody. This is rodeo announcer Doug Mathis for the Sanderson Ford Cave Creek Pro Rodeo, March 21st through the 24th. You know what goes good with rodeo? Ford Truck Month, and Sanderson Ford has trucks.
Get 1.9 financing for 72 months on new F-150 trucks. Save up to $15,000 off on new Lightning electric trucks and get 0% financing for 66 months on new Bronco Sports.
Don't miss the Cave Creek Rodeo and don't miss Sanderson Ford Truck Month. This is Sanderson Ford Country.
Well, and not only, on so many different levels of diabetes, hair growth, wrinkles, COVID, people that were in the hospital, and I know patients said low oxygen saturation, you hit them with the IV or the stem cells and boom, it's like it kickstarts into everything.
Yeah, there's data out there that was done during COVID. And one of the companies was Cellularity. Another one, they got FDA approval to do their stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 trials here. And it was interesting to show that the improvements that had been noted in patients who had COVID, and if they got therapeutic interventions during that time frame. Now, there's still a lot of data that's still coming out, but I think it's promised. It's a promise of a therapeutic that may not have a significant downside. The vaccine, we can have a whole 2-hour discussion on the vaccine, but the vaccine's got its own problems. And the problems is that it got pushed through pretty quick. It was the only option I think we had especially for Delta, Omicron maybe. But what I'm saying is that it's one of those things that we'll look back and say, was that a good move or a bad move? And I think what we ran into is unfortunately, we ran into the politics of healthcare that became obvious in the last 3 or 4 years, and it's become, unfortunately, it's affected every physician's practice, whether they're in the hospital or in a clinic, because people have this fear: are you going to take care of me, or are you just pushing something? It's like, look, we don't have a lot of alternatives, but I think, especially when we had COVID come out, but I also think that there was things we could have done or tried, and I think a lot of that was held up politically, and I don't want to get into a whole, whether you should or shouldn't get the vaccine.
Right.
Unfortunately, I worked in the hospital, and so I did get the vaccine, but that's because that was the only way I could take care of the patients I had in the hospital. So I think that things going forward, it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out. We won't know more until the next, 4 or 5 years, and that'll be interesting to see. Alternative therapies for that, maybe this stuff that will help is stem cell therapies that could be effective in some of the complications associated with any vaccine. It doesn't matter whether it's just COVID, it could be any vaccine. So I think there's promise in at least some of the cellular biologics that are out there.
But the problem is, and I could say this as a private, I guess, a citizen, and not have to worry about getting a license jerked away or anything like that, is the big pharmaceutical companies, they don't want to see something natural like this come in and be able to help because it's taken out of their pocket.
Well, I get it with big pharma, and I think that's kind of why we got Thriverock. If you look at the reason we're doing Medicine 3.0, this is where Peter Attia kind of talks about what's happened, and he doesn't necessarily talk about big pharma as much as the fact that we wait. Medicine 3.0 is really designed about when are you going to take care of somebody? I mean, if I didn't know you were going to be a diabetic because you had these risks, we could have done things probably a lot sooner, earlier. And if you know that your child's going to be born with type 1 diabetes, you have that indication. Is there something therapeutic that we can do? I believe that in the next 10 years, we will see huge advancements in the use of cellular therapeutics for especially genetic diseases. I'm hoping one of those is type 1 diabetes. We do know now that there's a drug that was just approved by the FDA, or a protocol approved by the FDA to treat stem cell, or to utilize sickle cell patients' own stem cells to correct the deficiency in their gene code. They use the CRISPR technology, and then they'll kind of get their bone marrow taken out. They'll get their bone marrow destroyed so they don't have sickle cells, and then they'll grow those new cells back and put them into their bone marrow so that they do not have sickle cell. That is absolutely phenomenal, considering that it takes away one of the biggest complications, especially with those individuals who suffer from sickle cell, with pain control and the complications associated with what happens with that, with that disease.
Howdy, everybody. This is Rodeo announcer Doug Mathis for the Sanderson Ford Cave Creek Pro Rodeo, March 21st through the 24th. You know what goes good with rodeo? Ford Truck Month, and Sanderson Ford has trucks.
Get 1.9 financing for 72 months on new F-150 trucks. Save up to $15,000 off on new Lightning electric trucks and get 0% financing for 66 months on new Bronco Sports.
Don't miss the Cave Creek Rodeo, and don't miss Sanderson Ford Truck Month. This is Sanderson Ford Country.
I'm excited about what the future holds in medicine. I just hope that we don't I hope the FDA doesn't give so much kickback that kick against what we're trying to do here in the United States. I mean, other countries are definitely ahead of us in trying to find out these therapeutics, but I do think that with the technology that's coming, that individual therapeutics are going to be the thing of the future. I think I briefly talked about CAR T cell therapy for leukemias, which is, technically it's kind of the same concept. You find that tumor, you identify the tumor, and then you have your own genetic code changed so that you can fight that cancer. And the cure rate, or not the cure rate, but because they won't call it a cure, but the length of time that people are going without recurrent cancer is phenomenal. So and that's an individualized therapy.
And is that what you said they're doing? You could do that in the States for like $500,000 or $750,000 or $250,000, but you can go to India and do it for $20,000.
Yeah, the cost of doing it here in the U.S. is over $1 million. I think going outside the U.S., you can do it for, maybe 30, 40, 50,000 for the same treatment. And I think that's unfortunate that, the way the market has worked here in the U.S. is we kind of cover the cost of everything, and I think that's unfortunate because the American population is the one that gets stuck with the shaft. So
well, and I've seen these therapies now for the last 5 years. Especially in rodeo athletes. Trevor Brazils, Bobby Moats, Casey Fields. Going down to Mexico and having some positive results from them. But it goes further than that. We talked about men, in this country are dying at a younger age, and how these therapies could help slow that down.
Yeah, there's so many things and I think we talked about that when you were here, about the fact that in it was October of 2022, the Scientific American published an article regarding the death rate in the United States, and men now die at the average age in the United States went to 73.2 after COVID. And you're going to say, well, is it all COVID? And it's more than that. It's opiate overuse and suicide. This is a board question. A test question is like, which population is at higher risk, the younger or the older population for suicide? And the answer is it's the older population. So I think even when we're talking about these stem cell therapeutics or the exosomes, whatever we're going to use, I think the other part is this, like, we need to get men to realize that we need to keep men as men, meaning that we need to make sure that they have the testosterone that keeps them functional. We need to make sure that their intimacy is maintained, and there's things that can be done that help all of that because of what men face. I mean, there's a great song just put out by Darius Rucker and his son. If you haven't listened to it, it's quite an interesting song about men in general. And I have to say that I think being a man in the United States these days is not an easy thing to be because there's so many expectations, but there's no real approach to say, what can we do to help? And the one thing I will say about, rodeo athletes, it doesn't matter how old you are, these guys, they buck up and they just do the work that's in front of them. They just keep going. But at the same time, it's a group of probably one of the funnest parts of rodeo. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, because I just get to see it from the sidelines when I'm in, at the arena with these athletes, is the camaraderie you guys have with each other. And that doesn't ever go away. That's probably one of the most important things avenues that men need to maintain throughout their life. If you do that, there's a whole study done at Harvard about maintaining those relationships and having that friendship. It makes your life much better and one that you enjoy living. So we need to change the mindset for the American male and say, look, it's okay to be a man, number one. Number two, we'll do what we can to make sure you maintain that. We may have to put you on some medications and help, whether it's your cholesterol or your blood sugar, but that doesn't mean that should be the only thing we do. And I think the idea of what we're doing here at this Thriverock is to say, look, if you come in, let's help fix you. Let's find out what's coming. We can help what's acutely ill because that's what we do. I mean, I'm an internist by trade. The other, I have another doctor who's also internal medicine, a couple family practice doctors who are working with this. So it's not like we can't treat the acute stuff, but how about we prevent the stuff from getting worse so that eventually when you're coming to see me, instead of me putting you on 15 meds, you're now down 3 meds or 2 meds. Right. And I think that unfortunately the way I was trained was if this blood pressure doesn't med, add another one. If that one doesn't do it, add another one. And there are definitely places for these medications to be used. I mean, if you have heart failure and the medicines out there, there's some absolutely effective medications that are used in heart failure patients. Without them, you wouldn't survive. So it doesn't mean I'm against medications. Right. What I am trying to turn away from is let's take personal responsibility. Let's move ahead, help you get to where you need to go. And then let's make sure that your future is much brighter and that you're not consistently saying, well, which pill am I going to take next week? Or what are you going to start next?
Howdy, everybody. This is rodeo announcer Doug Mathis for the Sanderson Ford Cave Creek Pro Rodeo, March 21st through the 24th. You know what goes good with rodeo? Ford Truck Month, and Sanderson Ford has trucks.
Get 1.9 financing for 72 months on new F-150 trucks. Save up to $15,000 off on new Lightning electric trucks and get 0% financing for 66 months on new Bronco Sports.
Don't miss the Cave Creek Rodeo and don't miss Sanderson Ford Truck Month. This is Sanderson Ford Country.
Here on the Luke Branquinho Show, we like to throw a little rodeo trivia around.
Which cowboy holds the record for most world championships in multiple events?
To hear the answer, you're going to have to stay tuned, keep watching the show, because I will answer it a little bit later.
Well, and I know being at the clinic and getting to be in there, I know you're going to send us some videos and just kind of tour us around the clinic. We're going to put on the show some pictures, but if anybody going through there, it's what is it? Thriverock
Medicine 3.0, yeah.
Yeah, Thriverock Medicine 3.0. Check it out online. Make an appointment. The thing about it is Lonnie will answer any questions you have, and he'll break it down to you. He'll give you the answers that you need to hear. And going back, you brought up rodeo cowboys and the camaraderie, and like when I retired, I thought, shit, what am I do? I'm done. I don't have an identity. And if it wasn't for the other cowboys that were still competing or guys that had retired, before me, if we didn't have that type of camaraderie, I don't know. It was a tough pill to swallow for me to say, hey, I got to be done. And you're exactly right. I think that's the best part about the rodeo community is everybody's still there and just the camaraderie we all have. But to that point, we did blood work. My testosterone was super low. And, you said mental clarity and intimacy and everything that a man needs at this age, especially. I could see how if somebody go off the deep end if they didn't have the numbers or be where they needed to be with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think people don't realize it's like, well, it's the process of aging. I'm just kind of mellowing out. Grandpa doesn't, you just get excited as much as you used to. I'm not saying that grandpa shouldn't get excited, but it's like, is there something else going on? Melancholy is one thing. Like, that's a problem. That's like, if that's not your personality, it's like, what do we need to do to make sure you're who you are? And that doesn't mean we give you testosterone to make you, kind of rage out because it's like, here, we gave you too much. What I'm saying is we need to get you in the therapeutic range where you're the same person you've always been. And I think until you experience it, because when we had that phone call, you're like, something happened. I don't know what it,
right.
It's like, and I kept thinking, well, what could it be? Because I'm thinking, stuff was pretty good before. And then when we got your test back, I was like, well, this explains a lot of what's going on. So
yeah, and that's, for me, it was a big eye opener. I got to see both sides of it. Obviously, the stem cell IV with my feet, how much it made the difference in that in my body. But then on the negative side, the testosterone dropping and falling off, and now I'm having that feeling, and finding that medium and like you said, the therapeutic numbers, not the or the clinical numbers where you need to be, and not raging out and trying to be the Hulk, but stay in that level where you're supposed to be at that age.
Right. And I think I'm quite confident that the future will bring us a lot more clarity on how we should how men's health should be looked at. Like I said, the mission for me now is I'm old enough now I could retire, but it's now become this mission of how come we are dying so soon? There's this, and I've had too many friends and colleagues that have passed away that should have never passed away, and they passed away from issues that had to do with healthcare. Sometimes it had other issues that were preventable, but unfortunately they still passed. And so I think now the mission is like, how many men can we straighten out? Women will outlive men. If we're gonna have that argument, women win. If you don't believe me, just ask your wife. She'll tell you.
Right.
They are the stronger sex. They will outperform us. That doesn't mean they're the stronger sex when it comes to short burst of energy. We'll definitely outperform them there. But if you're talking about longevity, they will outlive us. So we need to see if we can make that. We can kind of narrow that gap. If not in the United States, at least against the world, so that we can say, look, we're as good as the other countries outside the United States, because the Scandinavian countries, Japan, their longevity is amazing. What's wrong with us? And the point is, I think we have to have some changes in where we go in our own life. We make some drastic changes in our diet and our activity. But those are just, that's just the beginning. The other things are like, what can we help you do, and what can we do to help maintain your longevity and make you the person you want to be? I mean, like we talked about, I think once, the number of people who are like saving up for retirement, they have all this money put away and they've banked on their retirement, but they really haven't banked on themselves.
Right.
They come in, they're like, they're definitely 50, 60, 70 pounds overweight. Their knees are killing them. They haven't had any activity for, 10, 15 years. And it's like, I just can't walk anymore. It's like everything, but now what's retirement going to become?
Right. Exactly.
So, I mean, if you really want to, and if you really want to kind of get back at the government, don't try to try to live longer so you can get your Social Security longer. So the answer is like, let's give you a lot longer lifespan. Now, I will tell you that I think in the future to save Medicare, this is another aside, but people need to really be thinking about their healthcare really importantly when they're in their 40s and 50s, because I think that Medicare is going to change. Its 65, introductory rate for Medicare patients is going to go to 70. That's one way to save a lot of money and take a lot of people out of the Medicare. Right. I don't know when that'll happen, but I can see that. I mean, anybody in medicine right now will see that as that's part of the future that's out there. So
right. That's just crazy to think, for me being in my mid 40s now, that I need to start thinking about future of 60s, late 60s, 70s, when you're 20, you don't have a care in the world. You don't worry about any of that stuff. Yeah. But now it's like, wait a second, I better start thinking about a little bit further down the road.
Yep, I agree. And I hope that everybody kind of looks at this and says, what's my future look like? And it doesn't have to be dismal and like it's going to be over. It's like, just make a change today. If I could give any people any advice right now, just one piece of advice is 1, move, and 2, try to get your sleep better. That's it. Right. Do those 2 things on your own, at least to start. The weight will come, but if you start moving and try to work on your sleep, that's a big plus in heading you in the right direction.
Well, and something heading in the right, talking about women and all that. You said that you've had patients that you guys have done therapies on for crow's feet and wrinkles, and something my wife does. I mean, she just barely turned 40, and they're already doing these type of treatments. But the results you guys have had in that has been pretty exceptional.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think in what's that market? I mean, in the beauty market, that market is phenomenal. What can happen, because some of the technology that's out there is pretty impressive. But if we get the right components to put on, after the therapies, I think that the outcomes are going to be phenomenal, and people are going to be quite impressed with what happens. So we'll use everything we can to help you. If you look better, two things happen if you look better. One, you want to stay looking better, so that means you can exercise and you probably keep the weight off. And so that's those are two big pluses. So if it's look, if I make you look better, will you exercise a little more? Will you eat a little less? And if we change that, all of a sudden you've got somebody who's now added an extra 15 years to their life because they started to make some changes in just their behavior.
Yeah, and hair regrowth. I mean, I've seen that you showed me some pictures. That was absolutely phenomenal how fast the regrowth came.
Yep. And that's, and there's lots of reasons for that data. I mean, the things that they're coming out, and I can send you some of the links on that information, but it's interesting that it increases the vascular blood supply to the hair, to those hair follicles. And if people don't know it, each single hair is its own stem cell. So sometimes it just needs a kickstart. So it looks like that. I mean, some of the stuff that's going to be coming out in this, that's coming out right now is absolutely phenomenal. And the stuff that plastic surgeons are doing has been pretty impressive. So, yeah, I think that, like I said, the future's bright. I wouldn't get too down on yourself and think, well, we're all going to die at 73. The idea is we're going to at least push you to 93. And then we can have another discussion about what's the 10 years of your life look like. Peter Thiel describes that as the marginal, decade. I would like to take that marginal decade for your end of life that is kind of marginal to down to a year. You get to 93, you die at 94, but you're still mountain climbing at 93. So you're still moving up till the very last year of your life, rather than spending 10 or 15 years kind of bed bound and homebound and not really have much of a life. So,
well, and from a younger athlete's perspective, maybe get a couple more years out of their career.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we get some things changed. I mean, it's amazing and I have to say, it's amazing what some of these athletes can do, considering what they've been through already and how quickly they recover. I mean, it's amazing. So, rodeo athletes, I mean, the first X Games athletes do a pretty good job of maintaining their health, considering the beating they take.
Yeah, well, I know as well as anybody the beating that my body took, and now you see young kids like Stetson Wright that has been dominant for the last 3 years and has a major injury, has to have surgery, and what the stem cells could do for him as far as healing and getting him back to top performer. Right. And it's interesting to me how many of these young kids are actually researching it and wanting to do this. 15, 20 years ago, is just, I'm going to have surgery, I'm going to come back early, I don't care what the doctor says. Right. Now it's like, okay, do I need to sit out this X amount of time? Because if I don't, what's my future going to look like by re-injury? Now you add this whole stem cell concept in. Now I could sit out the required amount of time, get the stem cells, heal stronger, come back better than I was maybe before I was injured.
Right. And I think the nice thing about these young athletes is their response is going to be much quicker, just because they have their own independent stem cells. But it would be interesting to see how quickly they can recover and how long they stay recovered. I mean, that's the one thing you and I both know is when an athlete gets injured, even if it depends on it depends. It depends on where their injury is. It's your right arm. It's not your right arm. It's your turn-in leg. It's not your turn leg. And people go, what's that mean? Well, that's the one that's dominant for them. If that gets injured, pretty soon something else gets injured, because they've now lost the dominance of what they had. And it's like, okay, how do I prevent that from becoming an impediment as I compete, so that I don't have something taking me out that was really not that much of a major injury, but I didn't really let it heal up the way it should. So now I've got 3 other injuries I have to deal with now. And we see that all the time. We see that in rodeo all the time. When one injury hits you, another one hits you, because your body's trying to compensate and it can't do it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And we can go even further. I mean, we've talked about equine therapies. I mean, how huge would this be for, barrel racing, you can't do Banamine Butte, but if you give them a round of stem cells, this helps kickstart all that. Or in the racehorse industry, help these horses recover, heal, and naturally.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think that the potential there is absolutely huge, because if we can get to those, I mean, you think about it. I mean, people are doing they're banking the blood cord, the cord blood for their children, hoping they can use it someday. And that's interesting that there's a lot of plan what happens with that to use that stuff. But you think about that with these, these 300, 400,000, $1 million horses. If we can get to their stuff in the big area getting, what can you do with that stuff down the road when they're going to compete? And it's theirs. It's their stem cells. It's their own cells that we've recovered and said, here, use those. What kind of performance could they have, and how long could they perform for? I mean, do you have a 2-year-old that can now go to 4 and 5-year-olds, or do you have a 2-year-old that's done?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And I know there'd be a lot of vets, and it's been out there. I can remember doing PRP on my horse back in 2000, 2004. But, the stem cells, I know it's getting researched even more and even heavier now, but with what you guys have done and brought to the human side of it. And what I like especially is how diligent you are at your job as far as making sure it's the cleanest and the best product, because I think there's some questions with guys going to Mexico, and we've talked about this. You don't know exactly what you're getting because they don't have the regulations. Not saying that they're going to give you something bad, but you guys have the strictest regulations probably in the world.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a certificate analysis. We're certified tissue bank specialists. So it's like we've done all the things with the American Academy of Tissue Bank. So American Association of Tissue Bank. So we've done all the right things to make this right. And that's why it's taken so long to get where we are. This is not something you can say, well, we put a lab together and we'll be done in a couple of weeks. It's like, no, you'll be months to years. It takes that long to get all the pieces done right. So, well,
it was months to years, because I can remember about 4 years ago, you and I talking about this. And I mean, you guys finally were able to get up and going. How long have you guys been up and going now?
We got probably everything kind of straightened out in August of this last year. So it's taken that long.
It's a process. That's sure. And again, we talked about clients and patients. Everybody is seeing nothing but positive results. I mean, me especially, and I could speak to it because I've had it done, but anytime you could get, and word of mouth, I mean, it's hard to advertise this type of stuff to get out to the public, right?
Right. Yeah. Because there's a lot of things there's a lot. I mean, the FDA's job is two parts. One is to make sure you're not making claims that you can't support. And two is mislabeling things. So whatever we're doing, you won't find us make a claim on any of it. If somebody asks me, what does it do? I said, it might help, might not, but I can't make a claim because we just don't know what the efficacy is going to be for you. And sometimes it won't fix what you think it's going to fix. It might fix something else, but I haven't had anything bad happen. But at the same time, we're never going to make the claims that this is going to cure this and this is going to make this better. It may have an opportunity, but my belief in where things are going and the data that I've seen out there in the past, or here just the last few years, is that we probably don't. Stem cells don't. People think that you get the stem cells and they're there, they're there indefinitely, and that's not necessarily true. What happens is it kind of upregulates what's there. So your own stem cells get turned back on. So it would be interesting to see what happens with these young athletes, because they've got a ton of stem cells sitting there.
Right.
But we just need to help upregulate. The point is will it make a difference? I'm confident that it will. But just so you know, the reason we aren't as strong and agile as we are at 40 is because our stem cell, our own independent stem cell numbers have dropped dramatically. It's an exponential drop. So there's no way you can compete with a 20-year-old physically and say, I can maintain this. I'm like, you cannot. There's no way you can recover in the same amount of time that a 20-year-old can recover. You could both go through the same, wreck, the same issues, the same injury, and yet it'll take you longer to recover. And
that's scientific data. That's not just a claim.
Yeah, that's like, well, you're just jinxing me to say I'm old, and therefore it's going to take a long time to recover. And I'm like, yeah, take Turkey Bowl, or take the first time you play football after 7 years, and you think you can still play like you were in high school or college, until you fall down and go, man, I'm going to pay for this for the next 6 weeks, and you're going to be limping around for a long time. So I think these young athletes, it's amazing to watch them ride, because they bounce back so fast. unless it's
Well,
risky. But.
Yeah, and I never thought about that, until we talked about it. But when I'd get hurt at 20 compared to getting, and I'm not saying hurt, I mean sore. Like I'd, work out hard at 20 to 25, and then 35 to 40, you completely different turnaround on being able to bounce back and how you feel. But like you said, if you could maintain that with the therapies, who's to say that 40-year-old's not going to be able to compete with those 25-year-olds now?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Tom Brady has a little bit to say about how he can say, I mean, the guy could throw a ball pretty darn well at 42 years old. So
yeah,
that's an impressive pedigree for him to have and to be able to show what he can do. Because everybody remembers the game that they played against Atlanta during the Super Bowl. That was probably one of the most impressive games to ever watch. That game should have been lost, and he won it. And I'm like, he wasn't a 20-year-old when he won it.
Right. Well, and then look back, Aaron Rodgers blowing his Achilles, and he had his surgery, and they said, he has potential to be back if the Jets make the playoffs, which everybody in the world knew that would never happen. But, you'd have to think that he had some stem cells or something stuck in there to help that healing process.
Yep. Like I said, the future of healthcare in the United States, especially in the United States, is open if we can just start identifying the appropriate therapeutics and how we move things forward. And it's not like I want to be it's not like I'm cavalier thinking that, you can just do this. But I also think at the same time, I've given patients medications that everybody says is safe, it's ready to go, and then 5 years later, it's taken off the market because it has really bad side effects. And one of the best drugs out there for treating inflammation was Vioxx, but it caused heart failure. And so it's like here you're saying, well, this drug is going to be an issue. Well, if I had known what it was going to do it, 5 years later, I probably wouldn't been giving it to a lot of these people for their inflammation because the risk was too high. So I think in the therapeutic world, we need to let things play out and see where people go and say, well, is it hurting anybody? If it isn't, let's explore what we can do to expand what, the opportunities are for treatments down the road.
Right. And per data and what we know about science, stem cells it's almost like going to the health food store and buying all natural, vitamins or whatever. It's all natural. What you're putting in your body. Right.
Yep, it's the stuff we get. Like I said, it's perinatal tissue, so it does
stuff God created and made us out of.
Yep, and then, what, the babies do fine with it. So I'm saying if the kids are fine, I'm sure we're going to be just fine.
Well, I know I'm excited to go further with it, as should everybody that is alive, because and talking about the cancer treatments and stuff and Alzheimer's and things that this could potentially help and not say wipe out. I don't know that we ever will, but help treat it to where you could manage those diseases.
Right. And like I said, it'd be nice if we could put the disease process off by 10 or 15 years, meaning that the things you start feeling at 50, you don't feel till you're 70. You think about what that does, or 65, it doesn't hit you until 65. That gives us a good 10 to 15 years to see if we can, make a change with 2 or 3 medicines rather than 15.
Right.
So I think the future is going to be interesting to see which population can we help, with their longevity first. Which population? I don't think it's definitely not going to be the older population. We will make some inroads pretty quick, but it will be that, that 30 to 50-year-old population that's going to do the best in the future.
Speaking of future, where do you see? And I don't know if you can answer this, I don't know, without, saying something that you can't. Where do you see the FDA going with this? Do you feel like they're going to, at some point, they're going to have to say, hey, this stuff works. We're going to have to do something. Yeah.
I think that there's enough information coming out there. There's enough investment. There's a lot of investment in identifying therapeutics. There's a ton of money being thrown at the disease processes that are being treated. It's the amount of information that you have to make, or you have to gather, or the data that has to be gathered with the FDA, and to get to the phase 1 and phase 2 trials are their own, but to get into a phase 3 trial or phase 4, that's going to be an issue. So I think if we can, the one thing the FDA does, what we do in the United States better than any other country, is re-regulate. We regulate extremely well. I mean, you know what happens in rodeo, you know what happens when you're hauling horses. I mean, there's lots of regulations everywhere. The question is are we going to get out of our own way and let some of this stuff play out, or are we going to keep, over regulating to see what happens in somewhere else? And right now, I think the other parts of the world have some pretty impressive data on these therapeutic options. And so a lot of this stuff being done outside the United States.
Does the U.S. ever take into consideration the data that is out there in other nations, other countries?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're smart and you have a company and you want to do this, you get a phase 1 and phase 2 study done outside the United States to show, 1, it doesn't hurt you. 2, it's as efficacious as what's currently available. And then the phase 3 study is to say, okay, is it better? And is it a therapeutic option that's amenable to long-term care? I mean, the long-term therapies, or can it outlast what's currently out there? So the phase 3 studies are most expensive, but the phase 1 and phase 2 studies are all done most of them are done outside the U.S. so they can people at least get to those other stages, those other phases of research.
Lonnie, we've talked about it in the past, but the mental clarity, cold plunging, and other types of things a person could do to help better themselves.
Yeah, and I remember we were having this discussion about the sauna, the cold plunge, the things that you can do just independently. Now, the cold plunge has become a much bigger issue. People are definitely more attuned to what it can do. So I'll just bring you up. I had a pharmacist that I worked with up in Idaho, and great guy, and he was just telling that he rode. I think he rode a race from Logan, Utah, over the pass into Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Wow!
And it was in the spring, late spring, early summer. So it was like a warm, but it started raining, and then it started snowing as they started up the hill. When he came down the backside of the pass, coming into just on the other side of Logan to Wyoming, the other side, it had started raining and snowing, and they had been pulling all the bikes off the trail. And he's in his 40s, and he was going down He says he went all the way to the bottom of the hill. When he got to the bottom, they took him off his bike because he was kind of delirious. He does not remember riding down the backside of the hill.
Oh, wow.
He was so cold and so frozen. He was doing, and he said, I checked my computer that said I was doing about 50 to 55 miles an hour down the hill, but he doesn't remember any of it because he was so cold. So I challenged him to do the cold plunge. I said, well, try the cold plunge. And he says, last year I kind of went through, he says, I can't do the cold plunge. He says, why? He says, it just kills me. It's just like, he says, it's like I must have PTSD from being so cold, 10 years ago. So I said, well, let's just try, don't go cold, but just go lukewarm to where you can tolerate it, but make it so that you're doing it every day, or at least three times a week. So he did. He tried it where he could do 10 to 15 to 20 seconds. And it was amazing because he said he meditates every day because he's a bike rider. He's, his mental clarity is pretty good. But what he did say was that he noticed when he would go to meditate after the cold shower, we kind of went and told him how long, what you do, don't dry out. Dry out, but just don't try and get warm. That he went to do his meditation, and it was like he was focused. It was not like 5 minutes wait to get into this. He could do it almost immediately. And it's every time he's done just this cold therapy. And it wasn't the cold therapy that was it wasn't like ice cold. It was just lukewarm for him because he couldn't tolerate the cold, meaning that just even that much of a change makes a big difference. So focus is huge. And if you want to have a calm day to start with, do the cold plunge. You'll come out and you won't be near as agitated after that. Now you may be a little agitated in the cold shower, but when you're out, you'll be much better.
Well, I'm gonna have to try the lukewarm water because that cold, it gets me too.
Does it? Yeah. Start slow. Yeah. Start. Yeah. It has to be. It has to be cold. It just can't be ice cold. So
right.
Well, lukewarm. I know your name's Luke, but you got to be a little more than Luke. So
it's colder. And it is funny. After we had our first show with you, I seen more ads on social media of little tubs that's all they're used for. They fill them with cold water and people plunge into them. Cold plunging has gotten to be a pretty big thing. Yeah, no, my partner here, he's smiling at me. He's got a cold plunge put into his house. So there you go.
And a cold plunge put in there. So we're going to go see how cold we can get.
I did do contrast. Was it 50 degrees to 90 degrees back and forth one time? That was, wow. That was intense.
Yeah. And I bet that made you almost euphoric. Your brain probably was like, wow, where are we at? So.
Oh yeah, it dang sure did. The crazy thing is it took me about 45 minutes before I stopped shivering though after that last cold plunge.
Yeah, we won't make you do that again.
No. Like I said, I'm excited for you guys, and I'm hoping that this just keeps going up and beyond what your expectations are, because I know how much you put into it. I know how much you want to help, and not just rodeo athletes, but the entire mankind, I guess you could say. So I appreciate everything you're doing, Lonnie, and I'm excited to get back there and get another round.
All right. I'll look forward to seeing you, buddy.
Rodeo trivia question.
Which cowboy holds the record for most world championships in multiple events? That would be the one and only Travis or Trevor Brazil, depending on how well you know him. And he has won 26 world championships in the tie down, the steer roping, the team roping, and also the all around. Hey, you want to see more in-depth details on the Luke Branquinho Show? Make sure you like and subscribe.